So as you recall, we said, one of the main building blocks, a pretty common one, was a service, right? And we use it in a context of, I explained like a music player. So if you if you had a music player, you would need a UI to control the music, but you don't want to own the actual playing of the music in the UI, because the UI could be just wiped out, right? It's an activity. So we said that's what services are used for. They appear to run in the background because they're not visible, but don't confuse running in the background with running on a separate thread, right? We talked about that. So if we do, if we look at the life cycle of a service, typically it's much simpler. You basically you create it, you start it, you run it, and you destroy it. You could also restart it. Like if you click on start, it just basically calls start again, right? That's what we left it up. That's what we have going on toward the end of the day. So and this is the template for a service. This is what we implemented, right? We basically implemented this. So far, I said ignore onBind for the time being. It's used for bound services, which we're not doing right now. Bound services has to do with AIDL and binder, which we're going to do toward the end of the class. So we're using unbound service, and for that you typically need these methods: onStart, onCreate, onDestroy, and onStart command, right? So that's what we did. So to translate that into code, we created, this is just a review of what we did yesterday, right? So what we did is we created the Java class. So the significant things were that it extends service, right? Then we overrode those three methods from the template, right? So on create, on start command, and on destroy, right? So that's essentially a service. Everything else is now Java programming, right? It's not that much Android specific. Make sense? So when it comes to Java programming, we notice that if I click on start, on create and on start get called. Subsequently, just on start gets called. So on create is a good place to do something like one time. Like if you just want to do one-off, initialize Twitter or open up a database or connect to some service or something like that, right? So one-off things are good in on create. If there's a counterpart to creating, you would do that in on destroy, right? So for example, if I open up a database but I want to shut down a database, I would do the shutdown of the database toward the end of that. Make sense? Cool. Cool. So then what we did is we said in on start command, what we're going to do is we are going to we did this first. We just said, let's get Twitter timeline. And that pulls the Twitter timeline. Then we said, let's just print it out. So again, this is just Java. It may be weird for some of you who are new to Java, but this is just a list of statuses where status is a Twitter status object. Status is a pretty common name. This is a for each loop that says for each status in timeline, do this. So it iterates over everything in timeline. And then we put that in a try catch block because it's possible that this dies, right? This call here we don't really have a control over. Lots of things could go wrong. Network goes down, right? So that's basically how that works. And then we did finally what we said is let's put this in a separate thread. So we wrapped it in a thread, new thread, public void run, closed it, and do start. That's just how you put something on a separate thread in Java. That's just Java. Okay. Now, why didn't we do this using async task? We talked about async task yesterday as well. Why not do it using async task?
Because of the frequency with which we want the service to run, or whatever we're doing.
Okay, frequency. Okay, sure. What do you mean by that?
Well, a service you can keep running what's in a service. There's an async task. Once it's finished the thread.
Yes.
The thread destroys itself, and that's it. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, yeah, so async task, once it's done, it's done. That's correct. Yeah. Service keeps on existing, although it's not necessarily running, as in doing much, but it is running as in it's in a running state.
So the overhead involved is less than a service.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But also, do you guys remember why we introduced async task before? What was broken yesterday when we introduced async task? I mean, we did a thread first, right? And then it worked, and then we wanted to do the toast, and then we got it broken, right? Do you remember why?
It runs in it's separate to the UI thread.
Exactly. Async task had to do with the synchronization of the UI thread. So the main reason why we introduced the async task is we wanted to do something on a separate thread, but we also wanted to come back and update the UI. So that coming back and updating the UI was the reason why we needed async task to begin with, right? So now you know async task, great. There's a tendency like, oh, great, we need to put something on a separate thread. Let's just use async task, right? Well, I mean, it's kind of like learning to use a hammer, and then everything starts looking like a nail, right? So it's keep in mind why async task was used. It was used to handle UI updates. In a service, we don't have UI updates, so there's no real good reason to use async task, right? Usually. There's a slight exception, although I told you guys that service doesn't have access to the UI, so it doesn't really update UI. There is one thing service can do, and that's toast. So service can do a toast. Toast is sort of an exception to a rule because you can do a toast from anywhere, right? Like, something that's in the background could be doing a toast over a totally different application. The reason why that's okay is because they limited that length to long or short, so it's not like it can be abusive, presumably. So that's why it's okay. Okay. So does this now make sense? What we did? Okay. So how would you now do this to keep on running every so often, every 10 seconds or so, or 10 minutes?
Would we pass in a point parameter to the stop and start service, to the start service method? I'm just getting at it.
Okay. Yeah, you could put something. You could put a sleep-in loop, right? So you could do a run, and you could do around this run presumably. Let's think about that. I guess I could do it in here, right? Oops. So around these things, I could say while true, right? I could do something like this. And then presumably we sleep here, thread.sleep for some delay. So I'm basically, what I've done is this is the new line, these, right? So I'm wrapping that work that we want to do in an infinite loop, right? Make sense so far? So basically, this was what we had. This is the work that we had, and we just wrapped it in an infinite loop, right? Now, on delay is not defined, so I'm gonna define it as a constant. I'll just say final static final int delay, and I'll put like 30 seconds for now. Yeah, so it's in milliseconds, so 30,000 you know, or if you want to do it like this, you can say 30 here and then just do delay times 10, right? Times 1000, right? If you want, you know, something like that. So far, so good. Things make sense. Now, we obviously there's a problem here. This is underlined red, right? So what we could do is we could surround it with a try catch block. Okay. Okay. So you're preferring, you're saying do this, add a catch exception here, like that. Yeah, you could do that. Just basically just do a catch the mother of all exceptions, right? Like that. It's better to actually do a specific exceptions because you may do different things, right? Because here I could, for example, say log.e tag comma failed because of network error, right? So now people will know what the heck went wrong, right? And here I could say it's actually not an error per se, but it could be just log.d, right? Debug statement. I'll say something like, you know, interrupted, updater, interrupted. So far, so good? That makes sense? So we can actually start, we can run this and kind of see what happens, test it out, right? So I'm gonna click on run. It's launching. Okay, let me clean up my console. Go menu, start service. Okay, so it ran. Okay, so presumably in 30 seconds, it'd be interesting to see if it runs again. I'm gonna clear this up, right? So just to see what happens. Of course, you could make the delay be different, but I think 30 seconds is okay. There, it ran again, right? Clear it up. then again. Okay. So far so good. Now, what happens if I go? Everything looks good, right? What happens if I go menu, stop service? But it keeps on going. Wait a minute. So if I go to home, menu, system settings. Actually, I can do. I don't have to do system settings. I can do the menu and then manage applications, right? The service is not running yet. I mean, we're definitely seeing the data come through, but you don't see it here, right? We don't have the service running, right? So we have stopped the service successfully, but the code is still running, right? So I guess I guess you guys are kind of noticing that there's a double meaning to the word running and stopped, right? There's running as in the state that the service is in, right? And then there's running as in the code is actually cranking, like doing something, right? And same for stopped, right? Obviously our service is in a stop state, and obviously there's code that's running as part of that stop service. So the problem with our code was, I think somebody said that we're not stopping the thread, right? So what we could do is we could create the thread as actually elsewhere. Like, you know, there are a couple of ways to do this. We could create this thread elsewhere and then stop this thread. Or what I could simply do is I could also manage it via a simple loop. Sorry, flag. So for example, if I create a flag, I don't know, running, set it to false, right? Then on start, I would set it to true. So running is true, right? Then as opposed to having this be an infinite loop, I could do running while running, right? So that's new, that's new, that's new, right? So far so good. And then what I would do on destroy, because we know this gets called, I would simply set running to false. Right? So basically, this used to be while true, now it's while running. Running is true when you start it, and running is true false when you stop it. That's it. Right? So let's test that now. Alright, so menu, start service. Okay, it ran. Let's see if it runs again. We'll wait 30 seconds. And then we're gonna test if it stops, because that was the missing piece. Okay, so there, it ran again. Now I'm gonna say menu, stop service. and let's see if it actually stops. So it's about 20 more seconds. Yeah, so I think it stopped, right? Not seeing any more updates. So that kind of worked, right? Yeah.
So yesterday you mentioned that this service is actually running on UI thread. So when we call the start service, how can we block? Because we say thread.sleep, which means we are blocking the UI thread.
We're not blocking a UI thread because we are doing thread.sleep inside of the new thread.
So that's the reason why stop service is not acting on the new thread.
Yeah, we are spinning off a new thread. Inside of that, we're sleeping. Okay. Now this is where our little utility trace view comes in handy. So just to kind of demonstrate this, remember those lines of code that we commented out yesterday and the stuff that we did yesterday? I'm just gonna quickly comment it in just to demonstrate around this and see what happens. I'm going to do menu, start service. That's doing something. There, so it ran. Okay, so now I'm gonna say menu stop service and I'm gonna leave the screen. Okay, so presumably I have that file now. So adb pull /sd card /yamba.trace dot, right? Trace view yamba.trace. Okay, so you can see how we don't have async task in this case, but we have a thread. This is the thread that's basically responsible for doing all the networking stuff, right? So you can see that if you go over it, it's all reference to buffered reader and JTwitter and so on, right? So that's basically what it does. This is JSON tokenizer and so on. Right. So that's the separate thread that does that we spun out. Make sense? Okay, let me take a look. Guys, ready to move to something new? Okay, so so this is gonna work okay for things that just need to keep on running, are always on, such as updating your Twitter status, updating your email, things like that. Now, what if we wanted to just do something one-off? Like, for example, we want to refresh our timeline. How would you do that? How would you implement refresh a timeline? I want to be able to press on a button. Like, I want to be able to go here, go to my app, right? Press on a refresh button, and I would like it to do a one-off refresh. How would you do that? You could do an async task, yes.
Too much overhead.
Hmm?
It'd be too much overhead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean it'd be okay. Yeah, you could do it in async task. This is where it's not, there's no right or wrong sort of answer. Async task is good, but then you would own it in the UI. If I wanted to do something that I want to do down the line and attach this to periodically keep doing refreshes, then async task would not be the right choice. But it would be just if it's just part of the UI. So, yeah. Any other ideas? I mean, we could do a service and just do a one-off and then like basically start it, let it run, and stop it, right? It would like stop a service. But this is a lot of code, as you can see. Like this is sort of a, I mean, I can't put this on a single screen, not in large font, right? It's a lot of code. So there's another kind of service. It's called an intent service, right? And it looks like this. Intent service, basically it's a kind of service. So you extend an intent service, right? You need to provide the constructor, right? You need to provide onCreate, onDestroy, but then as opposed to, the main difference is that as opposed to onStartCommand, you provide onHandleIntent, right? And onHandleIntent is automatically going to run on a separate thread, on a worker thread. It's going to go create a thread, do the job, and kill itself off, right? Much easier.
And is it just once?
Yeah, just once. Mm-hmm. Make sense? So let's try to do that. Let's create a refresh service, a new service. So yeah, let's do the service first, then we're gonna update the menu. So I'm gonna right click, say new class. And for class name, I'm gonna pick, I'll say refresh service. And that's it. Now, inside of the refresh service, what we're gonna do is we're gonna we're gonna say extends, just like before. You get a subclass something, so extends intent service. Organize imports to import intent service. Yeah. Then we're gonna let this fix the errors. You're just gonna let Eclipse do this for you. So you click there, fixes one error. You click there, fix the other error, right? So just add constructor, add unimplemented methods. That's a good question. Why does this service require a constructor and the other one doesn't? I don't know. That's just how they designed it. I'm not sure what the rationale was behind that. But one thing to notice that's confusing about this one is that this constructor is not the constructor that you actually need. This is misleading. The constructor that you actually must implement is the default constructor, is the one without a parameter. So the template is slightly off.
How do you get to know something like that?
Hmm?
How do you get to know something like that?
You just play with it. I mean, that's how, yeah. I mean, that you're like, why is this file failing and this and that? Because the Eclipse template just gives you that, and but you must call super with the name. So usually what I do is, you know how I define my static final string tag, right? I usually pass that tag in here. That's what I usually do. So you must have a empty constructor, and you must call a super with nothing in it. And that's probably all you want. So now if you just want to do one of checking off Twitter, right, you could go and you could copy paste that code, right, that we did yesterday. So list for each blah blah, right? Right, and it'd be interesting to have on create and on destroy here, more so just so we can see that they ran, like so more so that so you have a template, not so much because we really need them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy my on create, right, and I'm gonna copy my on destroy. And the only other thing that's missing is Twitter variable. And everything compiles. And you don't need the running flag anymore.
What the difference if you instantiate the Twitter objects in uncreated versus in the constructor?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. I believe it does the same thing. You usually do not want to do things in the constructor that could potentially fail. Right? That's why usually in Java you do in init. Right? So you would like construct object to be easily constructed. And then you can initialize it subsequently. But Twitter, having said all that, creating a Twitter object doesn't really connect to the net or anything like that, so chances of it failing are low. It's the calls to Twitter that actually do all the networking. Yeah. It's a little logcat. And I guess technically we should put this in a try-catch block just to be fair. Something like that. So what's next? What do we do next? This compiles. Yeah, menu item is going to be one item that we need to do, but what else do we need to do to each main building block once we write the Java code? Yeah, we need to define it in the manifest file, yeah. So just like the service, it is a service, it's just a specialized kind of service. So go ahead, update the manifest file yourself first. Yeah, so we need to update the manifest file. Right? And yeah, like I said, permissions are all on the app level. See, they're outside of the application, right? Thing. But to add this service, you just basically, just like you did with the other service, so control space service, this name, dot refresh service. That's it. One liner. So yeah, so next you want to add the menu button, refresh. So you guys should know how to do that by now, right? It's the same as what you did yesterday twice. You need to do two things. You need to update your menu XML file, and then you need to update the processing of the menu, right? And that was in status activity. I'll give you a second to do that. So one thing was to basically go to a menu, add another item just like you did before. So I'm going to do it like this. So item, Android ID. It's going to be add plus ID. And then I can say item refresh. Right? And then Android title. And I'm going to say, oh, this doesn't allow me to. Okay, so I'm going to quickly add it here. Title, browse, new. Let's say refresh, refresh. There. That's what it looks like, right? So then once you add that piece of text in that ID, now you can go back to your status activity and you can process it, right? So and, on options item selected, we already have that. We said this gets called every single time any item gets pressed, right? And we have our pretty extensible switch statement that we can add another item to easily. So I'm going to say case r.id dot and item refresh is there, right? And then return true. And then I'm going to say start service for an intent. And I'll make up a new intent. I'll call it refresh. That. Right. So we already have intent. You know, I'll rename this one to updater now. So it's gonna be the same as what you had before. I'm gonna create a new intent and just call it intent refresh. And just change this to refresh service. Right? So basically, when the service gets started, when the button gets pressed, we basically send an intent to start a service, and that's it. So if I run this, let's see what we're going to. What's that? Can we create intent in the inside of here? Yeah, we could. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, this should be probably static. This could be static final, right? These could be constants, and so that we're not creating them every single time, we could put it like this, just outside. It's all maybe a little confusing, but well, actually we can't because it's using a this. Never mind. I'm gonna undo that. It's using a this. It's using a context. There is a different way, and that's to use it based on action. But it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so if I watch what happens. So menu. There's my refresh button. Right. So menu. Refresh. Except I didn't do anything in my refresh, right? In case I need to. I did. Oh yeah, okay, there it is. So there it is. On create service, on refresh service created, right? On refresh service handle intent, and on refresh service destroyed. So it basically created it, ran it, and destroyed it all at once, right? Make sense? Now, what's also interesting is that if I actually, since I already have tracing going on in the background, if I leave this screen, and if I now pull up the trace file, what you can see is that that's our refresh service there. And as you can see, it's running on a separate thread. What's not ideal in our code now? Okay, keep going. Superclass 4.
Too many hard-coded passwords.
Yeah, too many hard-coded. We have passwords hard-coded left and right, and we have lots of code repetition, lots of copy-pasting, right? Like the Twitter logic, the Twitter object, we need it in many places, right? So wouldn't it be nice if we kind of outsource that somewhere else? Right? So, okay, so that, one place we can do that is that place that I mentioned earlier, yes, on Monday, called application object, right? So just like we can have a service activity provider and receiver, we can actually have application object as well. So it may be a good place to hang the Twitter object off of the application object and keep it in there. Yeah. Right, because we see, notice how we copy paste this code everywhere. We copy paste, copy paste it here, copy paste it here, and so on. Before we start, you're right that username and password are hard coded, but before we start changing the username and password, I'd like to not to make the changes to the to refactor this first, right?